Okay, so anybody heard about 5G? There is a lot of hype about 5G, and I'm sure I have heard as well, why do we need 5G? I think there is a lot today that we can do with 4G, and of course we haven't necessarily seen all of the capabilities and the benefits that you can get with 4G. But imagine today, if you have 4G everywhere, what you could do if you had the types of capabilities which are the guiding principles behind what we want to do with 5G. And this is according to the guidelines that have been set for standards development for 5G. So 10 times battery life, 100 to 1,000 more connected devices, 10 gigabits per second on peak data rates, 1,000 times mobile data volumes, 10 times lower latency, and end user data rates that are 10 to 100 times faster than what you see today. This is not just another generation that is an evolution of what has happened previously. This will be a revolution. And what will enable this are the things that we are focusing on very much, which will enable the build out of the 5G network, which is fiber, to be able to have the capacity that you need with the deployment of the small cells, the millimeter wave spectrum, and we're talking about enormous amounts of spectrum that is needed to be able to enable these types of capabilities. Software-defined networks, because we will be focusing very much on being able to slice the network and provide the capabilities, not the same to everyone across the board, but specific to the kind of use case that is requiring characteristics of the network. This is not something new. This is what we have been working on for quite a few years, along with our partners, as well as what we are in the process of testing and getting ready to deploy. So in the past, when we have thought about how to express what are the capabilities of a new generation of technology, a lot of cases you talk about how quickly you can download a movie onto your phone. I don't think you'll really be able to notice the difference in terms of the speeds because it will be happening so fast. And you really have to think about what are the capabilities and opportunities and how really you want to use the network. I'm sure you will have all heard in some context of network slicing. And it really is about what aspects and what characteristics of a 5G network, going back to the previous slide, are you interested in? And the main characteristic of 5G is that we will be able to slice the network and provide that capability as it's needed for the specific application that you require. So whether it be more bandwidth or less bandwidth, you can see some of the applications and what would be important, either higher bandwidth or lower bandwidth, and also the latency or responsiveness. And then some applications will require lower latency, others are not going to have such a need for it. And you can start seeing how all of the different applications are much more focused on what kind of a slice of the network is needed and how can I get that slice to provide those specific targeted capabilities that are needed for my specific application. This requires a very flexible architecture and requires significant investments in being able to deploy the network that allows this type of flexibility, and the complexity also in developing these capabilities and making sure that they get standardized. So as I mentioned, deep fiber deployment, the multi-access edge compute network, and not only the ability to have an edge network, but also that edge network allows mobility as well. Very important. And then of course the slices, whether it be a private 5G network that you create or a public network with a public slice and the capabilities that it will provide. It's important to think through, and we would really very much want groups like this to think through what would you be able to do if you had these capabilities at your fingertip. This provides a whole new opening up of what you can do. In terms of the use cases, we have, in some respects, and I'm sure you are all thinking about some of these use cases today, we have a lot of different use cases, a lot of capabilities that we are already able to deploy, other than, say, maybe fixed wireless access, which is a replacement for broadband. In the future, you will be able to do it mobile. You won't need necessarily a cable to be able to provide that, or even fiber. There will be other ways of deploying it. Or the enhanced mobile broadband capabilities, those are relatively straightforward connectivity features, and basically what you would see as the next generation of connectivity. But then there are so many other use cases and so many other capabilities that you are able to provide as a result of the lower latency, of the number of devices that I mentioned, and the throughput, as well as the kinds of slices that you can create very specifically for each one of these use cases. And this is basically just a subset. This is what we can think of today, but I'm sure there are other capabilities and other use cases that we haven't imagined at this point. But this just gives you some form of a snapshot of what this could be. But most importantly, I think the way that we should be looking at this is in the context of the fourth industrial revolution. So think of what life was like before the printing press, or before the steam engine, and what life was like after. Or think more closely of what life was like before the internet. Anybody remember ARPANET? And what we thought was maybe the capability, and how many servers and how many people might be connected to ARPANET, or how many mobile phones that apparently we were going to need. Think of just these three use cases: massive IoT, autonomous navigation, and computer vision, as just ideas. But it will be revolutionary, and as much as we did not know what the internet would be until we found ourselves where we are today, and it continues to evolve, that will be the case also for 5G. So let's turn a little bit to standards, and where are we overall in terms of the development of 5G. Verizon has been leading the pack, and we have been doing trials with 5G, our own internally developed standard that we have been basically working on for the last few years. And last year we tested the capabilities of that standard with fixed wireless access in 11 cities. And later this year, we will be deploying our 5G solution in cities which we have indicated. And beyond that, of course, there will continue to be development. So if you look at where we are today, at the end of last year was the release of Release 15. And by the way, all of the testing that Verizon has done in the non-standard environment has driven forward the development of 5G. And where we thought that we would be seeing standards in the 2020 timeframe, we basically pushed it forward 2 years. And we are beginning to see those standards being standardized as early as December last year. That process is in the process of being finalized, so we will have Release 15 of the standard available in June 2018. What that means is it will provide the capabilities of a new radio, but it is considered non-standalone, which means it still requires a 4G core. And you will get the next version of that, which will be the standalone architecture, in Release 16 towards the end of this year and beginning of next year. So it is upon us, and we are in the process of starting that deployment very soon. And we have completed the tests, and the tests have been very conclusive and very interesting in terms of some of the capabilities and use cases that we have seen. So what does that mean for companies like Verizon and companies such as yourselves? Is, of course, we have always the need for connectivity. And 5G will not be different. We will still have connectivity for us, and it will be much faster than anything that we have seen, but we will also have connectivity for things. You could say 5G is the generation of the Internet of Things, because we will be connecting probably a lot more things than people with 5G. But beyond connectivity, it provides opportunities for what you can do above the network. And what are those use cases, and what kind of businesses and capabilities does that mean? So from our perspective, we are creating an ecosystem, and we are looking at what we will be doing beyond connectivity. and what opportunities they are. And we are very interested in hearing the ideas when we have these type of capabilities available to people like you. So from that perspective, we are invested in the Hive, and we are very interested in hearing what capabilities, or these capabilities, how they could be utilized to develop the revolutionary network that we believe 5G will be. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that enlightening keynote. And my name is Vijay Durabla. I work in the venture group, and it was a great opportunity to get Rima to come and speak with us today. And I thought we'd take a couple of minutes to do a quick fireside chat. So you're the Chief Strategy Officer of Verizon. You joined, has it been even a year since you joined?
6 months almost.
6 months, okay. And so, can you tell us a little bit about your day-to-day, what are your responsibilities, and you know, how does your day? I'm sure your day is jam-packed with a lot of meetings, but beyond that.
I have an R&D background, so my approach to strategy is explain to me why we believe this will work, and how are we going to make sure that this gets implemented, and why do we believe that this will be revolutionary, and why do we believe that it will be successful. So every single day, it is not only thinking about where Verizon needs to be 5-10 years from now, and making sure that you devote enough time to resolving those issues, but it is also immediately what is in front of us and what we need to do to deal with the competitive challenges and the opportunities that we have in front of us. And I think the way that I would best describe what is the role of strategy is it's basically 3 things. What are you endowed with? What are your capabilities and the assets that you have? What is the world around you doing and the trends that you are seeing? And what are the moves that you're going to make? So daily, that's what I try to think about and try to make a decision, which usually changes the day after, but at least it's good for a day. And strategy is never done, and I think that's also part of the job.
Yeah, no, that's needless to say that that's one of the toughest jobs on planet Earth.
It's very fun, though.
Yeah, it's fun. You know, it really you use a lot of brain cells because you're always constantly on the move. So you have a very unique background, and that is you spent your whole life building stuff. And you were the president of Ericsson USA, and you actually delivered a lot of the systems that have made companies like Verizon, AT&T successful.
Right.
And now you're on the other side of the aisle working for Verizon, who was probably one of your biggest customers.
Yes.
So can you tell us a little bit about how does your you're on both sides of the aisle. What are the challenges you see coming on this side versus when you were on that side?
So I would say pretty much through the whole time that I was working, I started in IT, I worked in Ericsson for 24 years, and then I recently joined Verizon. But I've never stayed in one role within Verizon. It's always, in Ericsson. It's good, I'm now saying Ericsson instead of Verizon. It's always been from different perspectives. So I think to be successful in whatever you do, it is important to have different perspectives, to be able to understand the challenges that it's easy to blame someone and see another point of view as, well, we are right and they're wrong. It's another thing when you're on the other side and you have to try to deal with the challenges that you experience. So when I was working as the head of a business unit in Ericsson, it was easy to blame the sales organization. It's another reality when you're part of the sales organization, but you get to blame the business unit, so that's interesting as well. But I would say it is interesting to be on the customer side, which is no longer the customer but the carrier, and to understand the challenges of how do you build the type of network and the type of capabilities that Verizon has built, and how do you remain number one? And how do you make sure that you are remaining number one, maintaining what has made you successful, but also moving fast enough with the speed with which everything is changing around us. So that's the balance. And there isn't any easy answer. It's a day-to-day adjustment as we go.
So it's interesting if you look at a company like Ericsson, which is a tech company. They build products. You look at Verizon, more of a services company, very good in beating out on the suppliers and getting the best price, but also integrating this and offering it as a great service to end customers, be it a business or a consumer. And one of the challenges that a large telco has is, there's always this sort of schizophrenia about, hey, are we a tech company or are we a services company, right? So do you see that on a day-to-day basis as you're talking to the business units? Folks say, hey, we want to build this internally versus, hey, you can get this from outside.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting. I mean, an audience like this would probably see the carriers and operators, first of all, as something that's a given, and probably not as innovative as some of the people in this room. But I think it requires a lot. It's a different kind of innovation. It's a different kind of shift. I think what I would say is, yes, there is an attempt within the company on a daily basis. We need to have that attempt to create a lot ourselves. But I think probably what I would say is, in any large company, we need to start thinking more like we don't have all of the assets of a large company at our disposal. How could we do things more efficiently? Because I think that's where the creativity comes from.
Right.
And not to necessarily get into things where there are solutions already. So my objective coming into the company is not to say that we have to do everything ourselves and that we will be better at everything ourselves, but is really to figure out where do we believe we have the right to win.
Right.
And then partner or acquire the companies that we believe have better solutions than we do, but in the process not kill what we've acquired.
Right.
So I think that's the balance that we are trying to strike, and it's a fine balance.
So I think there's a big picture sort of premise that if you look at the rate of innovation at an operator in the past, it's being a little slow. And then we get compared, I think, to the web scale guys who built stuff from greenfield, and they built it on top of what was existing, as in the network 4G. And now there's some technologies that have become sort of a no-brainer that are coming right now into the network, be it software-defined networking, virtualization, NFV, network function virtualization. And potentially, if you fast forward this, artificial intelligence and blockchain type stuff, right? So, is there a case to be made that the speed at which we innovate will be faster as this virtualization type software capabilities come into the network?
Yes, I would say yes.
Right.
The speed with which we need to innovate will be faster. And I think the speed with which we will make decisions has to be faster as well.
Right.
Very clearly to say, here is where we will not play, or here is where we will look to the outside to help us, and here are the areas where we absolutely have a right to win. Lowell, our CEO, says on a regular basis, and I try to think of this on a daily basis, we're not going to play just to play, we're going to play to win. And we're going to make sure that wherever we are going to have the winning approach. And if we cannot articulate how we will win in a specific space, then we shouldn't be there.
Right.
And then the objective, because I think a large part of strategy is not what you decide to do, but it's also what you decide not to do.
Right.
And I think that's one of the hardest things to do, is to walk away from things and not wait for how everything will be greener if you could just get over this hump and everything will be fine.
Right.
So that's also part of the tough decisions that we need to make, to say we will be much more successful if we stop doing certain things and really keep dry powder for those areas where we believe we need to put it.
Right. Right.
And that goes back to the concept of scarce resources.
Mm-hmm.
That, in that context, we need to learn, ironically, to think more like a startup.
Right. Right.
I wouldn't consider Verizon a startup, but we need to start thinking more like that.
That's a good thing. I'm sure our audience would like to hear that. And I think that's one of the reasons we were investors in the Hive, and we extended our partnership with the Hive 3 investment. Let's talk a little bit about artificial intelligence. This forum is about AI. And could you tell us a little bit about your perspective on how AI is going to impact Verizon, and which areas would be impacted?
It will be all areas, and we are doing quite a bit on AI. I would say it's a little bit isolated. We need to look at how we leverage the capabilities that exist across the company. So there is a lot of work that is being done in terms of artificial intelligence capabilities that exist on Oath, which is Yahoo and AOL that we acquired. There's a lot of work that we are starting to do on AI, enabling back office capabilities and really removing a lot of the tedious, mundane work. So there's a cost-saving aspect to what we need to start doing with artificial intelligence, as well as how we can leverage the data.
Right.
So we had a board meeting where I brought in a speaker, and the speaker said, we need to get all of the hippos out of the room and bring in the geeks so that we can really focus on the data and not just the highest paid person's opinion.
Right.
And I think that's what we're trying to do, and really look at how do we bring in the data and let the data help us make the decision. So that's the focus.
Got it. And means obviously data is an important thing, and Verizon has a lot of data. And given what's happening in the market right now around data and privacy and all that, just a point. Would you like to make a point about just how we treat our data, and or is that something?
Well, I think from the perspective of Verizon, we have very clear requirements on how we are obliged to treat data. That is a regulatory requirement,
Yes.
and from that perspective, we are complying to all the rules and regulations, and we will continue to do so.
Got it. So I'd like to.
I think we need to tell him that there's only a minute left. She's telling me he's
It says 2 minutes and 30 seconds. All right, so I'm going to wrap this up quickly. Just going back to one of the slides, you talked about the fourth generation, fourth innovation, industrial revolution. And is there a little bit of hype there, or you think 5G is really, are we going to be able to deliver that in terms of, and what is the time frame? What do you think is the time frame?
By the time you deploy the technology, the actual implementation and leveraging of the technology can take 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
So truly everyone leveraging the capabilities and basically taking it for granted, like we do today with our phones or the internet or the devices that have become part of our daily lives. It's been 10 years since the iPhone. And so you can expect that all of the capabilities that we are introducing today and all of the things that will enable, it'll be about 10 years. Of course, we will see early use cases of it, but just think from your perspective how quickly AI is transforming and how quickly those cycles are changing. And imagine if you now have the compute capabilities and the mobile capabilities, the throughput, latency, and everything else, how quickly that will evolve. But that's for this group and this audience. But if you want it to be spread across everything that we take for granted, then yes, that could take up to 10 years.
Got it. I think we close with my last question, and that is the importance of ecosystems and developers in building this next generation platform, right? Would you like to speak a couple of thoughts on that?
I think it goes back to one of the earlier questions, is Verizon is definitely going to build the best network and has the best network today, but we will not be able to deliver 5G on our own. It will be about how we will use the network. So we will, of course, be playing beyond connectivity, and we will be doing more than connectivity on the network, but it will be through the ideas and the use cases that you develop. And we acknowledge that we are not necessarily the ones that are going to come up with all of these ideas ourselves, and that's why we are very interested in something like the Hive.
Cool. Thank you very much.